PlayStation 2 era was a really special time. It was one of my best memories growing up as a child. Games created in that era feel so timeless, to the extent where I'm currently making my own game that is inspired by games from the PlayStation 2 era, both visually and also gameplay and story-wise. My first console was the PlayStation 1, but gaming really started for me with the PlayStation 2. So many games had amazing stories, characters, and gameplay. I would play all day long. It was one of the main reasons I was inspired to become a game developer. But then something changed with the following eras. More was better. Quantity over quality. More polygons, bigger worlds, more quests. Games had more. But they didn't feel so much better. Nowadays we have so many games coming out, but why do I keep finding myself going back to older games from the PlayStation 2 era? And why did so many games from the PlayStation 2 era just disappear and never come back? What happened? Let's go back and see where it all began. After an amazing start in the console market, Sony with its PlayStation 1 was able to outsell all the other consoles of that era, and even beat the long-standing champion Nintendo. And so at the start of the new millennium in 2000, Sony released the PlayStation 2. It was many times faster and better than the PlayStation 1, and it brought with it a lot of new technologies and capabilities. PlayStation 1 was the first test into the world of 3D gaming, but with the PlayStation 2, games really started to shine. PlayStation 1 had a bunch of 3D artifacts and issues that used to make the visuals a little bit strange, but with the PlayStation 2, they had finally fixed all the quirks and issues, and 3D started to look really good. For the first time ever, characters could really express themselves in games, both in terms of facial animation and also with high quality voices. Game developers could do so much more with gameplay. Advanced animations for awesome combat moves, large number of enemies to fight all at once, complex worlds and visuals, and also high quality CG cutscenes which were able to boost the visuals of the games even more. This was the era where developers really started to be able to fully express their fantasies. But the PS2 was still quite a bit limited in its hardware. It couldn't render photorealistic graphics, and due to that limitation, many game developers relied more on art style and art direction. And because of that, they were able to create amazing visuals that feel so timeless. Instead of trying to recreate real life, they created worlds and visuals that could stand out and look charming without high fidelity graphics. And that is what I think made them so timeless, because they focused on art style and art direction. And thanks to that, we got charming games and amazing sequels to timeless franchises like Final Fantasy X, 11, and 12 with their amazing JRPG gameplay and breathtaking stories and characters. Persona 3 and 4, which redefined JRPG by blending social simulation with dungeon crawling mechanics. Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, which pushed the boundaries of the stealth genre and movie-like cutscenes and stories. And entirely new franchises like Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, which makes the 3D platform mechanics of Mario 64 and the RPG mechanics of Final Fantasy, giving us an amazing game and franchise that people like me still love to this day. God of War 1 and 2, with its cinematic storytelling and larger-than-life battles. Devil May Cry 1, 2, and 3, which redefined the hack and slash genre and brought it to a whole new audience. And amazing 3D platformers like Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank, and Sly Cooper, each of which had its own unique charm, humor, and visual style because of their reliance on art style and art direction. All of these amazing games made the PS2 the highest selling console of all time, with up to 160 million consoles sold to date. But then something changed when the PlayStation 2's successor, the PlayStation 3, was preparing to release in 2006. Once again, Sony had created a new console that had state-of-the-art technology that pushed games past what was possible before. Unlike the PlayStation 2, the PlayStation 3 was capable of doing physical-based rendering, which allowed games for the first time ever to actually look like real life. Being able to render metallicness, roughness, reflections, and ambient occlusion allowed for game models to look very realistic. Games like Uncharted showed players that video games can look and feel like real life. And so the entire industry shifted their focus to making games look as realistic as possible. Metal Gear Solid 4 was able to show warfare similar to real life. Final Fantasy 13 made their real-time gameplay look as good as the PS2 era pre-rendered CG cutscenes. Assassin's Creed showed us historical cities and made them feel alive as if we were really living there in that time. And a ton of other franchises were able to create amazing graphics and experiences. And this continued with the console generations after, with the PlayStation 4 and now with the PlayStation 5. Graphics kept getting better and games became more and more realistic looking, to the extent where when you look at games nowadays, they can look even better than real life. But with all of these graphical advancements and the push and focus for high fidelity graphics, there were some big side effects. Several franchises like Ape Escape, Sly Cooper, and Jak and Daxter couldn't make the transition from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3 because of their cartoony look and their inability to adapt to a photorealistic focused industry. And so they died away and got buried with the PlayStation 2. Another issue is that with the push for high fidelity graphics, game companies needed a lot more time to create all of these high quality game assets. And so games started to take a lot more time to make. And on top of that, due to the games becoming bigger, there was also a need for more people to work on them. And so teams became much bigger. So games went from requiring around 1 to 2 years to complete with a team of 20 to 50 developers to now requiring 4 to 7 years to complete a game with a team of over 300 to 500 developers. And even in some examples, over 1,000 developers for just one game. I'm looking at you to Witcher and Cyberpunk. This has made the cost of developing games skyrocket, and these high costs have brought many problems. Compared to the PS2 era, where we would get several games in the same franchise over the entire console cycle, now we are lucky to get even just one game per console cycle. Game companies are also more scared to take risks, as they don't want their AAA multi-million-dollar game to fail. So they stay on the safe side and keep making the same genres and the same kind of games, with little innovation and risk-taking. Also, to be able to recoup their money and maximize profits, game companies are also trying to please all of the gamers. Because of that, the games start to feel bland and not unique. And because they're trying to cater to every single gamer, they actually end up not catering to a single type of gamer. Seeing all of these issues makes me wonder if it's really worth trying to push all games to be as high fidelity as possible. And while Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy 16 look incredibly stunning with their high-end graphics, I don't know if it was worth the big budgets and the long development time. And you can clearly see that when these massive companies constantly report that these massive games are not meeting their sales expectations. But there's one big notable company that did not follow the push to high fidelity and found massive success in sticking to their original philosophy. Nintendo, the company that started it all and that is still going strong to this day. From the start, Nintendo always had a philosophy of art style and art direction over high fidelity graphics. At first, they were forced to follow this philosophy because the hardware at the time was just not able to produce high fidelity graphics. But even when the Nintendo 64 and Nintendo GameCube came out, they still stuck to the philosophy where art style and art direction played a more important role. And this philosophy was challenged the most when all other consoles like the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 pursued high fidelity graphics, while the Nintendo Wii pursued innovation on gameplay and the way we play games. The Wii brought gaming to people who had never played games in their life, and the art style and art direction in their games made their games suitable for all ages, from young kids to grown adults and even the elders. Zelda Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword are so charming and timeless and had barely any need for changes when they were remastered for current day consoles because of their timeless look and feel. The same can be said for all of their other games, like all of the Mario games, with games like Mario Galaxy, Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros, and so on. And to this day they are still following this philosophy. Today the Nintendo Switch is the best-selling console of the generation and is very close to beating the PlayStation 2 and becoming the highest-selling console of all time. With every game that Nintendo makes, they always focus on art style and art direction, and this philosophy has worked out very well for them. Games like Super Mario Odyssey and Zelda Breath of the Wild take us to beautiful worlds and environments with charming characters and stories. Games like Animal Crossing with its cute and charming art style revived the cozy life sim games genre, which has now taken over the industry with so many cozy farming and life sim games. And great RPGs like Pokemon, Fire Emblem, and Xenoblade Chronicles, which all bring beautiful worlds with great art styles and art directions. And because they follow this approach, they're able to release so many games in such a short time. It is very normal to get multiple Zelda games in just one console cycle. And every year we get one or more new Mario games. By following their philosophy, games can be finished in a few years with smaller teams. And of course there are other reasons for why their games are successful and why it takes less time for them to make them. But for now I'm focusing more on the art style and art direction philosophy that they follow. And this is why every console generation, Nintendo keeps innovating, creating new genres and new types of games that define generations. And I think this is the biggest sign why art style and art direction is more important than trying to chase high fidelity graphics. And I think this is also one reason why remasters of PlayStation 2 games are easier to make than remasters or remakes of the PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4 games. Because PlayStation 2 games rely so much on art style and art direction, they still look great even after 20 years. And so when it comes to remastering them, there isn't a lot of work that needs to be done. Most of the time, it's enough to just polish up the textures to make them higher resolution, increase the screen resolution, and making it widescreen, and maybe throwing in a few quality of life improvements to the UI and settings. Take for example the Kingdom Hearts remasters. All of the games relied heavily on art style and art direction, so all they required to be upgraded to modern consoles was texture polish, increasing resolution, and making it widescreen. The same was done for remasters of Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XII, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, Dragon Quest 8, God of War 1 and 2, and many other games. These games were made with strong art direction, so they still look and feel fresh and timeless to this day. Now compare that to when games from the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 are remastered. Because they were focused on high fidelity and photorealism, their graphics didn't age as well in comparison. And so to remaster these games, developers need to do a lot of changes and update the games so that they can look good on modern consoles. 3D models need to be updated or recreated, environments and lighting needs to be redone, and because the games were very dependent on the graphics of their time, they sometimes still can't look that well after all of these improvements. There were several cases where the remasters somehow ended up looking worse than their original versions, and in some cases it's just better to remake the entire game so that they make it from the ground up for the next gen consoles, which costs a lot of money and ends up costing as much as just making an entirely new game. And this is why the reliance on art style over technology is what gives the PS2 era games their staying power. Their visuals weren't tied to the limitations of their hardware at the time, but were instead built on art style principles that continue to resonate with players today. But aside from the PlayStation 2 era games and Nintendo, there is a group of people that also follow this style of game making, and that is indie game developers. Indies often work alone or with small teams, and because of that, they don't have the massive budgets or teams to chase high fidelity graphics, and in some cases they don't even want to do that. And because of that, indie developers also rely heavily on art style and art direction. And thanks to that, one of the most impactful and beautiful looking games nowadays are made by indie developers. Games like Journey, Tunic, The Witness, Gris, and many others show how a strong artistic vision can make your game stand out and give people an unforgettable experience. Indie games' unique art style also allows them to stand out in a market that is saturated with hyper-realistic games that after a while just start to all blend together. So many AAA games get announced these days that feel like they're all just from the same game, with nothing unique in them that makes them stand out from each other. So many gamers these days are craving something new and different, and because indie games are rooted in creativity rather than technology, they're becoming more and more favorable to many people over the AAA games these days. And this is also the path I am following while working on my own game, Luminous Nights. I love the timeless games from the PlayStation 2 era with their bold art direction, and I want to recapture that in my game. Luminous Nights is heavily inspired by Kingdom Hearts 2, which is the PS2 game that I spent the most time playing in those days, and which I still play to this day with the remastered versions on the PlayStation 5 and Steam. I love the art style and art direction of the game and how magical it feels. It captures everything I love about the PlayStation 2 era games. The environments and worlds look so gorgeous. The characters are so memorable. The story is timeless and always makes me shed tears every time I play and finish the game. I really want to recapture that feeling, and this is what inspired me 3 years ago to start working on my dream game that is inspired by the PlayStation 2 era of video games like Kingdom Hearts 2, and what I hope to reintroduce to today's gaming audience who have never experienced that era. As an indie developer, I don't have the resources to create photorealistic graphics, but honestly, I don't really want to. My aim is to create a game that looks and feels timeless, with a style that resonates with players years from now. Every decision I make, from the character design to the world building, is guided by the same philosophy that made the PlayStation 2 era games so special. I believe that creativity thrives in limitation, and just like those developers in the PlayStation 2 era, I'm using those constraints to create something unique and memorable. And because of companies like Nintendo and indie developers, I'm feeling more hopeful about the future of gaming, because they show and prove that art style and art direction always wins over technology, and focusing on creativity over technology is what makes games so timeless and special. And so as we move forward, I think we can all learn from the lessons of the PlayStation 2 era. It's not about how realistic games look, it's about how it makes you feel. And that's the magic of video games. They're not just experiences, they're memories. And I can't wait to recapture this magic with Luminous Nights and share it with everybody when the game comes out. And if you're interested in following the development of my game Luminous Nights, you can head over to this YouTube playlist to watch the whole journey so far of Luminous Nights. If this video has inspired you to want to make your own video game or get into game development, one way you can get started is by learning some basic programming. And you can do that in Brilliant.org, which is a great online learning platform with tons of courses in all kinds of topics. One course I find quite relevant to game development is their Thinking in Code course, where you can learn the basics of programming. And what makes Brilliant special is their philosophy of learning by doing, where each course is all about doing practical exercises that help you learn so much easier and faster and make the whole learning experience more fun. And that style of learning is proven to be much better and effective than traditional methods. You can try Brilliant for free for 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/YahyaDambos or by clicking the link in the description. Plus, you'll get 20% off on an annual premium subscription. I'd like to thank my luminous heroes, Maxter, Sharknips, Wissam Khalid, Zender, X-Collateral X, Sultan, Carrick Lam, and Nathan Osworth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace!